Israel Adesanya.
28-0!
McGregor announcing
About a guy who
What's up, the homies? Leighton here for UFC Gambling Addicts, back again for another UFC full card breakdown and predictions video. This one's going to be Magny taking on Chiesa. And as always, before we go much further, make sure you hit the hams up button. If you don't know what the hams up button is, get to know. As you can see, we've got a new intro for the channel, so please let me know in the comment section, did you enjoy the new intro? I've got some other stuff coming to the channel soon, so I'm excited to bring that too. Alright homies, let's get straight into breaking this card down. First fight on this card, we've got Leonardo taking on Pirello. We're going to start with Victoria. So Victoria comes into this matchup 8 wins, 2 losses as a pro, making her UFC debut. Victoria is primarily a grappler. She showcased her grappling ability on the Contender Series, was able to stop her opponent with some ground and pound. However, it was pretty clear to see that Victoria is by no means a striker. She looked kinda out of place before she was able to grapple, but this is MMA. You don't have to be a striker to win. The opponent, Pirello, comes into this matchup 5 wins, 1 loss as a pro, also making her UFC debut. Manon is primarily a karate fighter. That's her main fighting style. But if you take a look at some of her pro fights, she doesn't look bad at all in the clinch and on the mat. She looks pretty comfortable in those grappling situations. So we have a karate fighter who seems fairly comfortable grappling, coming up against a grappler who doesn't seem that comfortable striking. That alone has me siding with the French fighter. I believe she's just that more well-rounded as a mixed martial artist. So I'm going to take Manon via decision. And I'm interested to see the numbers. I haven't seen any numbers on this card yet. I would price Manon around minus 200. I have been quite impressed in watching some tape. I'd put Victoria plus 170. And the actual numbers, we have Manon coming in minus 190, minus 180. Victoria returning plus 160, plus 155. So yeah, I like those numbers to begin this card. Manon, like I said, is a karate fighter. But if you take a look at the pro fights so far, she's grappling. She looks nice in these grappling situations. Victoria, purely a grappler who didn't look too comfortable striking. So putting 2 and 2 together, I think Manon is more well-rounded, and that's why I'm going to side with her in this matchup. Moving into the next one, we've got Umar Nurmagomedov taking on Sergey Morozov, and we're going to start with Umar. So Umar comes into this matchup 12-0 as a pro, making his UFC debut. Umar is a part of that Khabib gang, primarily a grappler, just like Khabib, combat sambo. However, if you take a look at this man's pro fights, you're going to notice something. Umar likes to kick. He really likes to kick. You don't really get that from many Russian fighters. We have got Zabit as a Russian fighter who is a brilliant kicker. I wouldn't put Umar on the same level as Zabit when it comes to kicks, but you can notice from Umar's game, he loves to kick. He loves to go high with the kicks. He does have that grappling background, the traditional combat sambo too, so I'm liking Umar Nurmagomedov. The opponent, Sergey Morozov, comes into this matchup 16 wins, 3 losses as a pro, making his UFC debut. The bantamweight champion over at M1, a pretty well-rounded fighter himself, who seems to be able to do it all. His grappling looks good. He can definitely stand and kickbox. Rightfully called up to the UFC. This is a really good matchup. Both guys making their debut, and it's not an easy matchup for either guy. Umar has a really tough task in his debut, and so does Sergey. I think we see some good grappling in this fight, and if we do, I think Umar maybe gets the better of Sergey in that grappling contest. So purely for those reasons, I'm going to side with Umar Nurmagomedov via decision. I really do like this matchup though, because in watching tape on Sergey, this guy is no walk in the park for anyone to be making their debut. And same with Umar. If you're getting Umar Nurmagomedov in your debut, you know, that's not an easy walk in the park. Both of these guys are turning up to the big time, to the UFC, to debut against each other. It's not a safe one to lay some money on, but if I had to make my numbers up, I would slightly price Umar minus 140, Sergey plus 110. And now we get to see the actual numbers. What are the actual numbers here? Oh my god, Umar Nurmagomedov minus 500, Sergey plus 400, which is, it's insane, guys. You know that's insane. Even if Umar goes in there and grapples his way to victory, lands a few nice head kicks here and there, good job, great job, but Sergey, from watching tape, I would never price this guy at plus 400. Yeah, I'm not going to be betting that. I do respect Sergey from watching the tape. I think he's a pretty tough debut for anyone. This is a really good matchup. A better matchup than the odds suggest, in my opinion. Could I be wrong? Yes. But from what I'm seeing, this is a really good matchup. Man, the fights really do get better as they go on. We've got Mike Davis taking on Mason Jones. And we're going to start with Mike. So Mike Davis comes into this fight 1 win, 1 loss inside the UFC. Primarily a jiu-jitsu fighter, with some pretty decent striking ability too. Mike Davis even done the Tiger Muay Thai trials a few years ago. Was successful during those trials too. Coming off a beautiful win against Thomas Gifford. I'm not sure how many of you guys remember that matchup, but Mike Davis put a real beating on Thomas Gifford. The opponent, Mason Jones, comes into this matchup 10-0 inside the UFC. That's a lie. Mason Jones comes into this matchup 10-0 as a pro, making his UFC debut. A double champion over at Cage Warriors. I've been watching Mason Jones now for some time on the UK scene. He's a bright talent coming out of the UK. Even fought one of my teammates a few years ago, Craig Edwards. Mason is a lifelong boxer, a really decent grappler too, who isn't afraid to level change to mix it up in there. Honestly guys, this one is pretty difficult to predict because again, I respect Mason's work, I respect Mike Davis too. I think both of these fighters have a really bright future in the UFC regardless of the outcome. I'm gonna side with Mason Jones. He's tough as nails, always willing to trade in the pocket, lands that low kick over and over too. Could Mike Davis prove me wrong? Absolutely. He's a bright talent also. I'm not going to be betting on this fight. I'm just excited to catch this one early on the card. But I am going to side with Mason Jones, you know. Is it maybe a little bit biased? I'm from the UK. Mason Jones is Welsh. Maybe a little bit biased, but I really do believe Mason Jones can go in there and have a good debut. And again, right, Mike Davis is no walk in the park to debut against. Mason Jones has really got a tough task on his hands, just like the previous matchup we just broke down. Mike Davis can box. He's only getting better as the years go on too. Mason Jones is really hungry, really decent boxer. This is a beautiful matchup. I'm going to price both of these guys minus 110 because I can't really tell the real difference with this matchup, but I am going to side with Mason. He's tough as nails and I know how much he wants this. I'm excited to see the actual numbers again. We've got Mason Jones coming in as an underdog, plus 150, plus 160. Mike Davis returning minus 170. Is it fair? It's completely fair. Mike Davis, like I mentioned, is a really bright talent himself. He does have the ability to beat Mason Jones. But that's not to say Mason Jones can't go in there and beat Mike Davis. This is just a high-level matchup in the best organisation in mixed martial arts. I can't wait. Jerome Rivera taking on Francisco Figueiredo. And we're going to start with Jerome. So Jerome comes into this matchup 0 wins, 1 loss inside the UFC. Debuted against Tyson Nam. That fight didn't go too well for Jerome. Ended up getting starched. Prior to the starching, he showed us what he's about. A bunch of kicks. Primarily a kicker inside the octagon. The opponent, Francisco Figueiredo, comes into this fight 11 wins, 3 losses as a pro, making his UFC debut. I believe this is the brother of the 125 champion, Davison Figueiredo. Finding tape on this guy was difficult. I haven't seen much, I'm going to be honest. But what I have seen is he looks pretty similar to his brother. Switches stances a lot. His jiu-jitsu also quite noticeable too. I'm pretty excited to see Figueiredo debut, purely because it was difficult trying to learn about this guy prior to the breakdown. Sometimes you have a guy debuting and it's hard to find tape. The UFC debut is going to teach you more about this fighter than any tape prior to the breakdown, prior to making your pick, right? There's no real confidence in making this pick purely because we don't know a lot about Figueiredo, but I'm going to try put 2 and 2 together here. Rivera likes to kick a lot. Maybe Figueiredo is able to catch a leg and take this fight to the mat. If he does, maybe he's able to finish this fight with a submission with his jiu-jitsu. So I'll take Figueiredo via submission in round number 1. My numbers would be Figueiredo minus 150, Rivera plus 120. And the actual numbers, spot on. That's beautiful. We've got Figueiredo minus 150, minus 140. Jerome Rivera coming back plus 120, plus 130. So even the bookies are slightly favouring Figueiredo. And I'm sure they've had a tough time too, trying to find some tape on this guy. Rivera, we saw in that debut, he likes to kick a lot. It didn't end too well. If he goes in there again and tries to kick a lot, maybe it goes a bit better for him. But Figueiredo, like I said, could catch a kick, take this fight to the mat, look to use his jiu-jitsu. I'm not exactly sure it goes down that way because, like I said, the tape was hard to find. But I'm going to put 2 and 2 together, try to create a story here. And the story for me, Figueiredo via BJJ. Moving into the next one, fellas, we've got Dalcha Langwambula taking on Marcus Perez. And we're going to start with Dalcha. So Dalcha comes into this matchup 1 win, 1 loss inside the UFC. I believe Dalcha has a judo background, but despite that grappling background, this man is purely here to take your head off. He isn't the most technical, he hasn't got a high output, his conditioning is nothing like a Max Holloway. His whole game plan is to land a big punch, and hopefully that big punch is enough. It's a fair game plan when you have so much power. The opponent, Marcus Perez, comes into this matchup 2 wins, 4 losses inside the UFC. Primarily a jiu-jitsu fighter. Marcus Perez got slept in his last fight. Kinda looked okay at the start of that matchup. It looked as if his experience may carry him through that fight, but one punch changes everything. And that's exactly what happened to Marcus Perez. I think the key to victory for Marcus in this matchup would be to weather the storm. The longer he can take this fight, the better for him. Just like I said though, one punch can change everything. If I had to bet on one of these fighters to change the outcome of this fight with one punch, it would be Dalcha. I think at some point he could land that knockout punch. So purely for those reasons, I'm going to side with Dalcha via TKO in round number 1. My numbers would be Dalcha minus 170, Perez plus 140. And the actual numbers, Dalcha minus 125, minus 130. Marcus Perez coming back plus 110 up to plus 120. So that's okay, that's interesting. I'm putting Dalcha more of a favourite than he is currently. And that's probably because I just don't see Marcus Perez doing much inside the octagon. He is a jiu-jitsu player, but as for his striking, it's never too effective. You know, he kind of looks a bit crazy in a striking situation until he's able to grapple his opponent. Can he weather the storm? Potentially grapple with Dalcha and find a submission later on in round 2, round 3? Maybe. But I think that first 5, 6, 7 minutes is going to be dangerous. Dalcha has a lot of power. And Marcus Perez was kind of slept by a weird punch. You know, in his last one, it looked kind of weird. Dalcha can take your head off. You know, it doesn't matter who you are. He can take your head off. Is it worth betting on at minus 130? Probably not, because he is a one-dimensional fighter, right? If he doesn't find that big knockout punch, he seems to be outclassed. He may slow down outside of round 1. So I think it's a dangerous one to gamble on either side. But, you know, gun to my head, I'm taking Dalcha in this matchup. Su Mudaerji taking on Adashev. And we're going to start with Su. So Su comes into this matchup 2 wins, 1 loss inside the UFC. Primarily a striker. A flashy, now you see me, now you don't type striker, right? Su is coming off a nice win against Malcolm Gordon. Even able to find a stoppage in that matchup. Which kind of proves, you know, the now you see me, now you don't. Gordon see him 1 second, and the second later, he's on the floor, down and out. All jokes aside, guys, Su is primarily a striker, a flashy one too. The opponent, Adashev, comes into this fight 0 wins, 1 loss inside the UFC. Completely slept in his debut by Tyson Nam, a fighter that we've got to break down later on. Adashev went for a naked low kick and basically woke up after that. Now, Su doesn't have the same stopping power as Tyson Nam, so Adashev should be more comfortable with the power this time, but Su isn't as stationary as Tyson, so Adashev will have to work harder to find those openings, those low kicks. This is a much better matchup for Adashev. I think he should look to use his grappling in this one. I believe he has a grappling background that wouldn't go amiss against Su Mudaerji. The flip side is, Su is coming off a nice win that should give him some confidence to get back in there, get back to his flashy style, and maybe pick up another win if he's able to fight his fight. Good matchup for both guys. I'm gonna side with Su Mudaerji. I like his flashy style. He does have to avoid the grappling, like I mentioned, and if he can, I think it's gonna go pretty well for him. So I'll take Su via decision. My numbers, I'll put Su minus 160, Adashev plus 130. And I'm interested to know the odds on this one. Su Mudaerji, of course, minus 500. Adashev plus 370, plus 350. It's not as insane as the other one, the Umar Nurmagomedov one. I wouldn't say it's as bad as that. But if Adashev can grapple, if he can take down Su Mudaerji, you're going to see minus 500 drop all the way down to minus 150, plus 100 in play, right? Adashev should probably grapple in this matchup. Su Mudaerji is going to look to be Su Mudaerji, right? Flashy, stay on the feet, in and out, a lot of movement. Just look to strike. Be that striker that Su Mudaerji is. Do I agree with the numbers? Absolutely not. Alright, the homies, you know what time it is. If you waited to smoke with me, amen. If you've been smoking this whole time, double amen. If you're not a smoker but you enjoy the smoke breaks, triple amen, gang. Hallelujah. Let's go. I hope all of you guys are doing blessed. We do have to speak about Blessed, by the way. Before we get into that though, I want to remind you, if you haven't hit the like button, please go ahead and do that. If you're not a subscriber and you're tuning in for the first time, if you've enjoyed these breakdowns, go ahead, hit the subscribe button. Okay, so before we get into philosophy, motivation, Max Holloway. Oh my good God. Guys, Max Holloway's an alien. That dude is from another planet. Seriously. All the bros who picked Calvin Kattar with me, I know there was, we are in the minority taking Calvin Kattar. If you go onto the community tab, I believe 35% Calvin Kattar, the rest on Max Holloway. So most of you guys, the majority of you guys, you made the right pick there. So amen to that. Now, all of you bros who took Calvin Kattar with me, how ridiculous do we feel? Oh my God. To see Max Holloway turn up and perform like that, we know he's good enough. We know he can do that. But he did that. He really did that to Calvin Kattar. I saw 10-7s, guys. Sometimes we watch around and we think, that was a 10-8. That was a 10-8. I saw 10-7s, maybe even 10-6s, right? If you could have a chat with the commentary team, maybe 10-6s, right? So Max Holloway, wow, just insane. Insane, guys. We spark up to that performance, man. Just amazing. Okay, so philosophy this week. I want to mention adversity. Now, we kind of mentioned adversity in the last smoke break last week without mentioning the word adversity. I mentioned that maybe you have a bill payment that's late. That's a form of adversity, right? Adversity is a part of life, fellas. I always enjoyed playing video games growing up. Some people may think that's kind of nerdy, but that's who I am as a person, right? That's what I enjoy. So I'm going to give you a video game example of adversity. Did anyone play Call of Duty growing up? There was a perk on Call of Duty. I'm not sure if the perk is still on there because I know COD is still running. I haven't played it in a few years, but there was a perk back on COD 4 called Juggernaut. Juggernaut was a perk that allowed you to basically take an extra couple of shots. I was always a stopping power type of guy. I like to use that perk. But Juggernaut, the point I'm making is Juggernaut made you more resilient. It allowed you to take more damage before you crumbled. You must be resilient in this life, fellas. Resilience is your armor. How much armor do you have as a person? How strong are you as a person? I'm not talking physically, I'm talking mentally. Are you easily breakable as a person? I'm going to say it again, guys. Adversity is a part of life. Overcoming adversity is a part of life. We lose a lot in this life. You must become resilient. You must become a man that cannot be broken by anyone or anything that comes your way. Maybe you got fired from your job. Maybe you suffered a horrible injury. Maybe you lost friends. Maybe you lost money. Maybe you're a normal person living in this world who has adversity come your way. We all have adversity, fellas. We are all going to have struggles. But I'm asking you this. Are you going to allow adversity to stop you? Are you going to crumble, bro? Are you going to crumble? Are you going to let adversity win? Or are you going to show adversity, hey, I'm just too resilient. You can't stop me. See, you have to understand, fellas, that in a way, destiny and adversity are tied together. In a way. Do you know your destiny as a man? Well, let me tell you this again. On that journey to your destiny, adversity is coming for you, my bro. That journey isn't going to be all sunshine and rainbows. adversity is coming for you. It's come to you before, and I'm here to tell you it's coming again, my bro. I'm just here to give you the message that you are Juggernaut. You are Iron Man. You are unstoppable if you know how resilient you are as a man. And let me tell you, believe me, you are resilient. So next time adversity comes your way, show yourself just how resilient you are. So amen to that, my homies. We are the Amen gang. We are strong and we are resilient to anything that comes our way. Every week we dive into motivation and philosophy. I love doing that, man. That's who I am. I love to speak about this stuff. You guys inspire me to keep being who I am as a person. And I want to let you guys know that being you is enough. But you must understand who you are. The understanding this week is resilience. Please understand just how strong you are as a person and take notice next time adversity comes your way. Take notice of your resilience and be proud, man. Be proud what you overcome in this life. Okay? That's the message I want to give you, homies, this week. My Instagram is at UFC Lay. So if you want to be homies outside of YouTube too, we can go ahead and do that. If you haven't got Instagram, that's cool too. The comment section below this video is always a great place to chop it up. I mentioned at the start of this breakdown, I have some cool stuff coming to this channel. I'm excited to bring that. Maybe it'll be next week. It might be. If it's not, it's definitely going to be the week after Conor McGregor. And even when I bring that to the channel, I've got so many more things that I want to do to further project my career on YouTube. You know, I want to progress. I love breaking down fights, and you can't really break down these fights too much, too different to what I'm doing now. But I've got some ideas to project my channel, and I'm really excited to go ahead and do those ideas. Alright, homies. Again, if you haven't hit the like button, go ahead and do that. Let's get into breaking down these fights. Now, the next two fights I've already broken down, so I'm just going to go ahead and put the breakdowns in that I done last week. It's not going to be a new breakdown. But yeah, we have some more fights to break down on this card. Let's go ahead and do that. We've got Ricky Simone taking on Gaetano Pirello. And we're going to start with Ricky. So Ricky comes into this fight 4 wins, 2 losses inside the UFC. Primarily a wrestler. Ricky is coming off a split decision win against Ray Borg. To win over 15 minutes against Ray Borg really is something to be proud of. Ray Borg is a complete workhorse of a fighter. That non-stop grappling mentality, it's not easy to beat. Ricky Simone was able to compete with Ray Borg and ultimately beat him at his own game of wrestling. The opponent, Gaetano Pirello, comes into this fight 15 wins, 5 losses as a pro, making his UFC debut. Gaetano seems to be primarily a striker. This dude really is a decent call-up to the UFC on short notice. I've seen a few of his fights now, and he's quite a nasty guy. One of his main techniques is that low kick. He has no problem firing that low kick over and over. I've seen a couple of times that he's actually been able to open his opponent up with a nasty cut, where the referees had to stop the fight, bring the doctor in. So yeah, Gaetano Pirello, from watching tape, this guy really isn't bad at all. If Gaetano can keep this fight kickboxing, I would expect Pirello to actually maybe win that type of fight. That's not saying Ricky Simone can't stand and trade, because he can. He's proven that. Uriah Faber was able to drop Ricky. If Pirello can stay upright, he could land multiple low kicks and maybe even eventually finish that fight with a significant strike up top. But the flip side is, Ricky Simone is more experienced at a higher level. He does have a strong wrestling game. If he chooses to implement his wrestling, it could be a long night for Pirello. I love this matchup to start the year. I'm gonna side with the wrestler to use his wrestling to his advantage. So I'm gonna take Ricky Simone via decision. And my numbers would be, I'd put Ricky minus 200, Pirello plus 170. And the actual numbers, we have Gaetano coming in plus 255, 260. Ricky Simone minus 300, minus 310. So yeah, I would agree Ricky Simone to be a decent favourite, but maybe starting the year a little bit too deep. Gaetano Pirello, man, I mean, I've watched this guy strike. On the feet, I think he has a decent chance of damaging Ricky, but it's staying on the feet, right? I would probably put Ricky minus 2, just over minus 2, to be able to get that takedown. Minus 300, that's a little deep. Should he be the favourite though? Absolutely. Does he need to implement his wrestling? Absolutely. Omari Akhmedov taking on Tom Breese, and we're going to start with the Russian Omari. So Omari comes into this fight 8 wins, 4 losses, 1 draw inside the UFC. Primarily a wrestler. Omari doesn't change. He hasn't really changed at all. Every time we see this guy, it's the same bag of tricks that's coming out. And that's mainly because his style works. If he's a better wrestler than you, and he can look to level change over and over, this man wins. As for his striking, it's simply, I'm going to throw some heavy leather, hopefully it lands. He's not a technical boxer or kickboxer or anything like that. He's all about that wrestling life, and it seems to go pretty well for him. The opponent, Tom Breese, comes into this fight 5 wins, 2 losses inside the UFC. Primarily a boxer, as most English fighters are. Tom does suffer with some mental side of the game, but that's not to say, any other fighter doesn't suffer with the mental side. The only way we know Tom Breese suffers with this side of the game is because he pulls the plug before the fight. Whereas other fighters may pull the plug inside the octagon after a couple big punches don't go their way. Tom Breese, he seems to mentally fall before he even gets to the octagon. But as far as I'm concerned, when Tom Breese does get in there, when he is in the fight, most of the time this guy looks good. He looks really good. He did have that setback to Brendan Allen, but we know Brendan Allen is a top guy. He's a good grappler. Tom Breese is coming off a nice performance against an opponent that maybe shouldn't have been in there with him, but you can only fight who's put in front of you, and Tom Breese got in there and got it done. The question in this matchup is, can Tom Breese fight his fight? His fight isn't wrestling. Can he stop the wrestling of Omari? Because if he can, I think he has a good chance of clipping Omari, maybe getting a TKO stoppage. I do think that's the real question though. Can Tom Breese stop the wrestling? I'm going to say yes. Some of you may say no, and that's completely fair. It is a difficult fight to be confident in, but I'm going to side with my countryman. I think Tom Breese is a good wrestler himself, and that's maybe why he's able to stop the wrestling. And if he does, I think he could clip Omari. So my prediction's going to be Tom Breese via TKO in round number 1. My numbers would be Tom Breese minus 160. I'd put Omari plus 130. And the actual numbers, we have Tom Breese minus 140, minus 150. Omari plus 120, plus 130. Yeah, it's spot on. Omari should maybe be the underdog, but not by a lot. And that's what we're seeing. Tom Breese, he does suffer with that side of the game, but if he can get in there, if he isn't defeated before he even gets in there, he looks good. Most of the time, he does look good. And like I mentioned with the setback with Brendan Allen, yes, he lost that fight, but it was a good one. That was a good matchup. For me, I'm going to take the favourite here. I'm going to take Tom Breese. I think he can stop the wrestling. If I'm wrong, Omari once again shows us that, he doesn't change. His style does work. And if he can prove that again, credit to him. Lerone Murphy taking on Douglas Andrade, and we're going to start with Lerone. So Lerone Murphy comes into this fight 1 win, 1 draw, 0 losses inside the UFC. Primarily a boxer. Lerone is fighting out of Manchester, England. My fellow countryman. Had that debut in a sauna against Zubaira. Really impressed me, actually, with his ability to not give up in those tough grappling exchanges. Had a huge win against Ricardo Ramos. Really showed us he's not here to make up the numbers. This man is a solid boxer who's looking to make a statement in the UFC. The opponent, Douglas Andrade, comes into this fight 4 wins, 3 losses inside the UFC. Also primarily a boxer. Tough as nails is Douglas Andrade. This will be his 30th pro fight. Coming towards the back end of his career now. Despite that, he's never been a walk in the park for any man. Not even to the champion, Peter Yan. Yes, Peter Yan was able to win that fight, but Andrade never got stopped inside a round. It was outside of the round the stoppage came. Stylistically, I think it's a better matchup for Lerone Murphy than it is Douglas Andrade. Can Andrade compete in this matchup? Yes, he can. But Lerone Murphy hasn't hit his prime as a fighter yet. He's still building his way to his prime. Getting a matchup against a guy who's on the way out should be a big stepping stone for Lerone Murphy. I do believe Lerone Murphy can find good success with his boxing. So purely for those reasons, I'm going to take Lerone Murphy via TKO in round number 2. My numbers would be Lerone minus 180, Douglas plus 150. And the actual numbers, if I can find them, we've got Lerone Murphy touching minus 300, which is a little bit crazy. Douglas Andrade coming back over plus 200. I do slightly disagree with these numbers. Douglas Andrade, like I said, man, he's tough as nails. Not a walk in the park for any man. I would still give the favourite to Lerone Murphy, but touching minus 3, just over minus 3. Yeah, gotta disagree with that one. But the pick is going to be Lerone Murphy. Tyson Nam versus Matt Schnell. And we're going to start with Tyson. So Tyson comes into this fight 2 wins, 2 losses inside the UFC. Primarily a kickboxer. Tyson had a tough start to his UFC career. Fought Sergio Pettis and Kay Kara. Lost both of these matchups, but was able to go 15 minutes. Picked up some good experience against both of these guys. Since then, he's had 2 wins, 2 stoppages, which kind of shows you how valuable those early fights were against Sergio Pettis and Kay Kara. The opponent, Matt Schnell, comes into this fight 4 wins, 3 losses inside the UFC. Primarily a grappler, I would say. Matt Schnell is also a fighter that has evolved and become better as he's gone on. I wouldn't say his striking is too dangerous. He was able to wobble Pantoja in his last fight, but ended up getting wobbled and finished himself. I would say this matchup is striker versus grappler. Tyson Nam will be more than happy standing and trading with Matt Schnell. Matt Schnell would be more than happy to hit the mat with Tyson Nam. It really comes down to who can implement their style. For me, I think Tyson Nam is able to implement his style, able to keep the fight standing. If he does, I think he could stop Matt Schnell. So for those reasons, I'm going to take Tyson Nam via TKO in round number 1. My numbers would be Tyson minus 200, Matt plus 170. And the actual numbers are nowhere near what I've predicted. Tyson Nam minus 130, minus 125. Matt Schnell plus 110, plus 115. So my numbers are nowhere near the actual bookies' numbers. I believe Tyson Nam can do this. I think if it stays on the feet, Matt Schnell could be in trouble, you know. But then again, it does come down to who can implement their style better. Like I said, I'm sure Tyson would be more than happy to trade in the pocket with Matt Schnell. And I'm sure Matt Schnell would be more than happy to grapple with Tyson Nam. So it's going to come down to a battle of will. Who can implement their style? For me, I'm quite confident that Tyson Nam can implement his style. But now I see the actual numbers. You know, I'm not going to second guess myself here. I'm not going to. I think Tyson Nam is a solid guy. He had 2 defeats early on in his UFC career to Sergio Perez and Kay Kara. And since then, he's gone on to do some good things. And I think he could continue to do that against Matt Schnell. So my pick is going to be Tyson. Can Matt Schnell do it? Maybe. Maybe he can. I think he would have to grapple though. So yeah, I'm excited to see that one now. Now I see the odds are very different to what I'm predicting. I'm excited to see that one. Moving into the next one, we've got Roxanne Modafferi taking on Vivian Araujo. And we're going to start with Roxanne. So Roxanne comes into this fight 4 wins, 4 losses inside the UFC. A veteran of women's MMA, primarily a grappler, a wrestler and jiu-jitsu fighter. Roxanne has never been a good striker. That's not where she's beaten any of her opponents. She will stand and box with you, but that's only to set up her takedowns and her clinching up against the fence. She's very jerky on the feet, constant head movement, which does kind of make her difficult to tee off on. Roxanne will always be best though when she's able to take her opponent to the mat, when she has an advantage in the grappling. Her opponent, Vivian Araujo, comes into this matchup 3 wins, 1 loss inside the UFC, primarily a striker, with some jiu-jitsu credentials too. Vivian looked great in her last matchup. She fought De La Rosa. She was never at risk of being taken down. She fought her fight, which was keeping it kickboxing. And, you know, she looked great there. She really did. Vivian was taken to the mat by Jessica I, basically out-wrestled. So to say Roxanne can't do that would be kinda ignorant. Roxanne definitely has the ability to grapple with Vivian, but the flip side looks a little better in my opinion. The flip side is Vivian uses good movement to keep herself kickboxing. She has a clear advantage over Roxanne in the striking. And that's what I'm going to predict here. I think Vivian has shown us some good stuff so far in her UFC career. And I think she's able to continue to do that against Roxanne Modafferi. Roxanne may have a little bit of success here and there, but ultimately, Roxanne has to take her down and basically drain her gas tank the way Jessica I did. And I'm not too sure it's going to happen. So I'm going to take Vivian via decision. My numbers would be Vivian minus 180, Roxanne plus 150. You can never price Roxanne too much of an underdog. She loves to win at plus money. And let's take a look at the actual numbers. Vivian over minus 300, Roxanne plus 270. So yeah, I'm saying you can never price Roxanne too much of an underdog. And here we are, plus 270, which is a big underdog. I'm not going to sit here and say Vivian is a banker. You know, she's definitely going to win. Roxanne is a veteran in women's MMA. She's a good grappler, you know. She's going to get in there and try to implement her style against Vivian. But Vivian, she needs to use good movement. Be aware of the game plan of Roxanne. And I'm sure she will be aware of that game plan. It's a good matchup, man. I'm going to side with the Brazilian, though, Vivian Araujo. IK Villanueva taking on Vinicius Moreira. This matchup is probably the weirdest matchup on this card. But when you look into it, when you Eddie Bravo look into it, you kind of understand this matchup. So Villanueva comes into this fight 0-2 inside the UFC. Seems to be a journeyman in this sport. Nothing wrong with being a journeyman. Not everyone can be world class, elite in the sport of mixed martial arts. we have to respect every man and woman that steps into the octagon. Villanueva hasn't had any success so far in the UFC, finished in both of his UFC fights. Granted, the last one was a doctor stoppage, it's still a stoppage. Villanueva has to show us something in this matchup. Vinicius Moreira, 0-3 inside the UFC, primarily a BJJ player, a fighter that's looking to take you down and basically break your arm. As for his stand-up ability, kinda non-existent, but you would anticipate work being done on his striking. Somebody's O has got to go, and by O, I mean the winning O. Neither guy has picked up a win in the UFC. Someone's going to win this fight. Villanueva would simply have to avoid being taken down by Moreira, in my opinion. I do think he's a better boxer than Moreira. I'm sure a lot of you guys would agree. Could Moreira take down Villanueva? We haven't seen Villanueva defend any takedowns yet. It's a pink slip fight. Loser probably leaves town, and the winner should be grateful that they haven't left town yet, you know? So that's the meaning behind this matchup. Both of these guys haven't found any success, and now one of them is going to find success, right? I'm going to side with the boxer. I think the striker is probably a more comfortable pick to make here. So I'm going to take Villanueva via TKO in round number 1. My numbers would be pretty close. You know, it's understandable. Villanueva minus 120, Moreira plus 110. It's going to be interesting to see the numbers. Villanueva minus 140, Moreira plus 110, plus 120. Makes complete sense. I would slightly favour Villanueva, but, you know, he hasn't shown us any takedown defence. He hasn't had to defend a takedown yet. Can Vinicius Moreira be that guy to show us, look, Villanueva doesn't have any top takedown defence? I'm going to find my first submission. I'm going to side with the striker, but I could easily be wrong here. You know, if you're picking a side in this fight, just get ready to see if you're completely wrong or completely right, you know? Alright, homies, co-main event. We've got Warley Alves taking on Mounir Lazzez, and we're going to start with Warley. So Warley comes into this matchup 7 wins, 4 losses inside the UFC. Quite a well-rounded Brazilian fighter. Seems to have dropped off a little over the past 2 years. We know what Warley Alves can do. His jiu-jitsu is good enough. His boxing ability also good enough. But does seem to have dropped off from who he once was. Maybe we get the old Warley Alves back in this matchup. The opponent, Mounir Lazzez, comes into this fight 1-0 inside the UFC. Primarily a sniper. Those are the words of Mounir. He sees himself as this sniper type striker. I actually took Mounir in his debut as a big underdog to beat Al Hassan. I felt his movement would really play into that fight, but it wasn't actually his movement that got him the win. It was more Al Hassan looking to finish the opponent as quick as he can, punched himself out, gassed out. I don't think Warley Alves is going to have the same mentality as Al Hassan with the let me try finish you as quickly as I can. I think Warley will be more composed in his pursuit. But that's also a good thing for Mounir. Mounir is trying to use his movement. He's trying to snipe you in and out like a sniper. I've got to side with my boy Mounir in this one. I think he's going to be too quick, too intelligent for Warley. Maybe even a finish at some point too. So I'll take Mounir Lazzez to get a late stoppage via TKO in round number 3. My numbers would be Mounir minus 200, Warley plus 170. Now, like I said, I took Mounir in his debut as a big underdog. So it's going to be interesting to see, is he still close as an underdog? Is he an underdog? The actual numbers, Mounir over minus 200. You love to see it. You absolutely love to see it. Showed up in his debut and showed us, man, he's here to compete. This guy's a sniper. That's his words, right? And now he's getting his second fight in the UFC over minus 200. I can't argue against it, guys. I mean, I agree with it. He's going to be too quick for Warley Alves. I think Warley has to find the old Warley, you know? And I don't think it's going to happen. Could be wrong. You know, this is fighting. Look what happened to Buckley, right? Unbelievable. So there's always that chance of being wrong, but I'm going to take Mounir. Main event, we've got Michael, Don't You Talk About My Mum, Chiesa, taking on Neil. I have more wins at welterweight than GSP, Magny. We're going to start with Michael Chiesa. So Chiesa comes into this matchup 10 wins, 4 losses inside the UFC. Primarily a grappler, a jiu-jitsu dude. Submission wins and decision wins is what Chiesa has in the UFC. Not one TKO on his resume. It's no secret what Chiesa is looking to do. The grappling background is always being used in his matchups. Looks way better at 170 than he did at 155. Being a little bit inactive though, which may go against him. The opponent, Neil Magny, comes into this matchup 17 wins, 6 losses inside the UFC. A veteran at this point, primarily a boxer. Neil Magny always has the size advantage when it comes to reach. Super long dude. Conditioning always been good. His wrestling recently also looks very decent. Neil Magny seems to be hitting his prime as a fighter. It's got to be said. I love this main event. Neil Magny absolutely doesn't want to hit the mat with Michael Chiesa. Neil Magny knows he has a striking advantage, a big striking advantage. He's going to look to use that in this matchup. Chiesa will simply look to stick to Neil Magny like glue. Chiesa is quite good at doing that too, right? One thing I have noticed, guys, is Neil Magny has been submitted 3 times in his career. Sergio Moraes, Brazilian black belt. Damian Maia, Brazilian black belt. RDA, Brazilian black belt. It seems like if you aren't a Brazilian black belt, you aren't going to submit Neil Magny. If Chiesa can do it, he joins a really, really good list. I'm going to side with Neil Magny. Like I said, he's hitting a nice run of form in his career, and I think it's going to show in this fight. Potentially even a TKO stoppage too. So I'll take Neil Magny via TKO in round number 3. My numbers would be Neil Magny minus 190, Chiesa plus 160. And the actual numbers, Neil Magny minus 140, Michael Chiesa plus 120. Wow. So there's a lot of money going on Michael Chiesa. There's a lot of money going on Neil Magny. Personally, I don't see it that way. I do favour Neil Magny a bit more than Michael Chiesa. But then again, if you put both of these guys on the ground and keep them there and say you can't stand up, you've got to stay on the ground, who do you favour? It's a no-brainer, right? You favour Michael Chiesa. But if you put both of these guys in a boxing ring and said you only box, who do you favour? Right, you only favour Neil Magny. So it is going to be one or the other, right? And for me, I think the biggest sign is Neil Magny has only been submitted by Brazilian black belts. So if Michael Chiesa wins this, there's going to be a new joke on this channel, right? We've got the Kevin Home Alone Holland. If Michael Chiesa gets it done, from now on, Michael Chiesa is a Brazilian. He's no longer American to me. This dude is a Brazilian black belt. Alright, homies, I hope you've enjoyed the breakdowns, the smoke break, all of that good stuff. Make sure you drop a comment who you're taking, your underdogs, all of your favourite picks. And as always, until next time, peace.